radio, and they can't see what he's doing.
No, he was singing. He was singing out loud. That's what I was saying. He was singing along with this. And
he didn't have his mic on,
if
so
he keeps that up,
yeah,
he's going to keep that up. I'm going to start thinking he's singing the intro.
I sing along with that one almost every time it comes up. Dig that song.
Me.
Welcome back to Justice and Drew, final segment for this Tuesday morning. And as we are every Tuesday, pleased to be joined by Pete Hegseth from Fox News. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Excellent.
Well, Russians meddling in the election, Gorsuch committee hearings, Obamacare, all kinds of stuff going on, Pete.
Tons going on. I'm actually here in Louisville. I was at the Trump rally last night covering for Fox, and then we did some stuff this morning with Fox and Friends on it. And all that going on, I mean, you'd think that President Trump is bogged down, that his supporters might be discouraged. I mean, it couldn't be any more the exact opposite. I mean, I've never seen a crowd like that. It felt like a sporting event. They had to move all the scaffolding off of a big part of the arena that they didn't think would be filled, and it was instead completely filled wall to wall. And you can tell how much energy he draws from a crowd like that. But I also think it's a reminder to Washington, D.C. that this guy wields a certain level of political clout and political power that can't be calculated by one lobbyist in Washington, D.C. or a special interest. And his ability to bring that to bear on, say, Obamacare as it moves forward or on the nomination of Gorsuch, I think is a sort of continues to be an not fully understood dynamic, especially as he wields his maybe Twitter account or other things when people start to decide not to back it or oppose it. It's going to be really interesting to see how that new kind of power and currency is used as this deal on, say, the repeal of Obamacare finally happens, because we haven't had this type of person with that type of power, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, and we too often, we look at politicians, we look at presidencies, not as individuals, but as some other entity, as somebody else up higher, and we don't bring it down sort of to our level, to a normal level. Donald Trump is a human being just like everybody else and has feelings and emotions just like everybody else. And so we often go and point to things like Twitter or, comments out on stage as an indicator of how he's dealing with particular situations. But the truth is, we don't really know except for the people that are around him. So it raises that interesting question of how it's affecting Trump personally, all of these ancillary, if you will, things going on. Yeah. But as you mentioned, Pete, you listen to him at the rally that took place, and you would see an individual who I would tend to believe is not being consumed by all the other issues and is still trying to push forward with what he thinks is best for the country.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think largely true. I mean, if you think about how inundated he is with people in his ear with advice about what he needs to do, what he should change, how he should change his tweeting habits, what he should watch, who he should listen to, whether he should move more conservative to bring on the Freedom Caucus, or whether he should go to the middle to find, more common ground in the Senate to get the repeal and replace of Obamacare done. I mean, he's got more advice coming his way than probably anyone has ever seen, because everyone assumes this is a new guy to politics. He's a businessman. We got to kind of guide him and lead him. But the thing is his instincts of what got him here. His Twitter feed is what got him here. His willingness to raise his hand at the first debate and say, I won't abide by the Republican endorsement on day one, when no one else would have ever done that, because you just don't do that in politics. I think he's still, at this moment, to your point, John, he's willing to ignore what people are saying to him and go with his gut, because his gut has gotten him this far. And I would argue that the minute he sort of abandons that and tries to get put into a box, he's playing by the rules of Washington, and those rules means he loses. So the extent to which he can continue to channel that outside game and shake it up and be disruptive, I think will dictate whether or not he gets the votes he needs, say, in the Senate on repeal, which is really going to be the big fight. I think he'll get where he needs to be in the House. Some Freedom Caucus members have already moved. They've shown a willingness to adjust some of Obamacare to make it more free market friendly, or the repeal of Obamacare more friendly to free market folks. But what happens in the Senate and the hardball there, it's really interesting to watch on stage. Listen, the folks that came out to hear Trump speak are not fans of Mitch McConnell, I'll tell you that.
Sure.
He basically booed when he came out, and even Trump could barely get them to applaud for him. You also have Rand Paul, who's kind of on the other side, wanting more of a free market solution on the repeal. So, there's a reason they went to Kentucky. He's going to be arm twisting on both these guys, and I think continuing to be a disruptor is the secret to his success.
Now, do you get the sense that this repeal plan, is this I mean, Trump's voiced support for it, but it feels like this is Paul Ryan's deal. This is Paul Ryan's plan. This is something that he's been advocating for, and Trump just seems, from my perspective, to be more just okay. If that's the one you got, that's the one we'll go with. It feels like. Go ahead.
I think that's right. I mean, I don't think healthcare, of all the issues that have motivated and animated Trump supporters, repeal and replace of Obamacare wasn't number one for most of them, although for conservatives it's such an animating issue because of how much it has disrupted our economy and just transformed the lives of average people whose premiums are devastated by it. So I think he wants to clear the decks because he really wants to get to fundamental tax reform. He really wants to get to so many of the other things that he really made a priority. Doesn't mean I think he wants to compromise on it. I just don't think the details are of great interest, as great of interest to him. And I think some disservice was done to him by people, I think it's largely Speaker Ryan, coming to him and his administration saying, this is the bill. We've got general consensus on it. It's going to pass the committees with full Republican support. You're not going to have a problem with it, without fully vetting the way the Freedom Caucus was going to respond, the way some of the other conservative members were going to respond. Then he's had to readjust. And because remember, it was a binary choice. It was what they told us when it was first released. Now they're willing to make tweaks to it. I think the messaging of the three phases came a little bit late, so people didn't understand why the cross-border, across state lines didn't happen right away. So it hasn't been perfect, but I think you're right. I think Trump wants a bill that he wants a bill that 3 years from now, people are looking at their premiums and their choices and their lives are better. He's not wedded to an ideological perspective, which more conservatives are because they believe in how it'll play out. So what this will be judged by ultimately is how effective it is in returning the sort of the cost of healthcare back to normal. And I think that's why he's willing to bring in a Zeke Emanuel 3 times to the White House, who was one of the architects of Obamacare, is to understand the unintended consequences and how to plan for them. So, yeah, I think he wants to get this done and out. And if he doesn't, it's going to be very disruptive to the rest of his agenda.
Talking with Pete Hegseth, what was the biggest takeaway for you with the hearing yesterday on the FBI investigation into possible Russian influence and Comey?
To me, the biggest takeaway is what'll be interesting to see is when the FBI comes back and the FBI reports that there's been no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, that if there were people on the fringe of the campaign who had pre-existing connections that they continued responsibly or otherwise, but there was never a concerted effort to collude with them to undercut the election, whether or not the media is going to shut up about it, whether or not they're going to say, okay, you're right, there's no evidence, we're going to move on, or whether they're going to keep going with the straw man discrediting argument that Donald Trump is really just a puppet of the Russians. So I think it's good that there's an investigation going on. I think it's good that the FBI is seeking to get to the bottom of it. And I think ultimately, based on all the evidence that already exists, it's unlikely you're going to see any real serious collusion at all. But instead, as Comey said, there was a direct effort from the Russians to try to undercut Hillary Clinton, which is what it was from the beginning. I think the wiretapping stuff, at this point, there seems to be not much evidence there either. But I think there still remains a sense that the system was rigged against President Trump, and there was willingness to share and leak information in ways that were detrimental to him also. So I don't know. I mean, Comey's in such an impossible spot and has both sides not trusting him that there's very little he could do to come out winning on that.
We're getting underway with the Gorsuch hearings, are just getting started on Capitol Hill. Do you sense any... it doesn't feel like there's going to be a whole lot of real spirited opposition to this confirmation. Is that the feeling you're getting as well?
Very much so. I don't know how you vote against him.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, except on ideological grounds, which most Democrats will happily do. Ultimately, there's not a single person out there that doesn't acknowledge that this guy is a top-rate constitutional scholar, as qualified as anyone. Conservatives love him. There's no doubts there, so it's important he close ranks on that. And hopefully there are enough fair-minded Democrats that remember that elections have consequences and presidents get to make their picks. I also think if they're smart, if the Democrats are smart, they're saving their ammunition on this one, because this is just an ideological replacement. This is replacing a originalist with an originalist. If the minute you lose a Kennedy or a liberal member of the court, that's when they're going to burn the House down to defeat whoever Trump nominates. So if they were smart politically, they're going to pull back, give him what he wants, and then live to fight another day. He's so credible, I feel like that's ultimately how it's going to play out.
Pete Hegseth, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. We'll talk to you next week, okay?
Yep.
All right, take care.